European history. The Spanish Civil War. The Spanish Civil War, 1936–1939. The Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939 was an armed conflict between the conservatives, church, landowners and fascist elements against the Republicans, socialists, communists and anarchists in Spain. The Civil War broke out or started with the military or army uprising in Morocco on 17 July 1936, triggered by the events in Madrid, and it eventually spread to Milan, Spain. The war was led by General Francisco Franco, a senior army officer in the Spanish army. The Nationalists, as the rebels under General Franco were called, were supported by Adolf Hitler, Germany, and Benito Mussolini of Italy, the Nazis and fascists respectively. The Republicans, on the other hand, received aid from the Soviet Union, Russia, as well as from the international brigades composed of foreign volunteers from Europe and the United States. The war ended in 1939 with the victory of the Nationalists, who overthrew a democratically elected Republican government and installed dictatorship in Spain that lasted up to November 1975. Causes of the Spanish Civil War, 1936–1939. The negative effects of the world economic depression of 1929–1935 caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. Between 1929 and 1935, there was a world economic meltdown situation, a period of reduced economic activities characterized by increased unemployment, low consumption, low income levels, poverty and economic stagnation, among others. It started in North America and later spread to other parts of the world, including Spain. The Spanish Republican government failed to deal with these economic hardships, which were worsened by the 1935 drought and 1936 storms which destroyed crops. This polarized the Spanish public, thus encouraging the army under General Franco to organize a civil war in 1936. The success of the Republican Revolution in 1931 against the Spanish monarchy laid a foundation for the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. In 1931, the Spanish King Alfonso Roman XIII, under increasing pressure, authorized elections to decide the government of Spain, and the voters overwhelmingly chose to abolish the monarchy in favor of a liberal republic. King Alfonso Roman XIII went into exile, and therefore the Second Spanish Republic, initially dominated by middle-class liberals and moderate socialists, was proclaimed. This success inspired a group of senior generals from the part of the Spanish army based in Morocco to stage a coup d'etat led by General Franco on 17 July 1936, and Spain quickly erupted into a civil war. The rise of Spanish nationalism, fueled by the loss of colonies, caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. For example, there was loss of Cuba during the Spanish-American War of 1898, in which the United States joined Cuba in her war of independence against Spain. She also lost Abatal to the Berbers in the Spanish Protectorate of Morocco in 1921, which heightened nationalistic feelings among the masses in Spain. The failure by the liberal Spanish government to restore such colonies in foreign glory undermined its credibility, and therefore inspired a group of army officers under General Franco to stage a coup attempt in July 1936, which deteriorated into a civil war. The general insecurity in Spain caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. In 1931, the Second Spanish Republic was established following a period of right-wing dictatorship under monarchical rule. Unfortunately, this republic fell victim of the deep historical divisions in the Spanish politics, thus polarizing Spain in early mid-1930s between the left-wing and the right-wing political sides. European history. The Spanish Civil War. Insecurity in the country, which undermined its credibility. This inspired the senior army officers under General Franco to stage a coup attempt in July 1936, which eventually resulted into a civil war. The influence of the left-wing Popular Front Party caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. On February 1936, new elections were organized and the Popular Front, a left-wing party, gained a majority win in the Spanish government. This annoyed the fascist and extreme right-wing forces, and therefore they began plotting to overthrow the government under the Popular Front Party. Consequently, in July 1936, the right-wing military leaders under General Franco responded with an army mutiny and coup attempt against the Spanish liberal government that eventually expanded into a civil war. The anti-Catholic policies of the Republican government caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. In 1936, the government passed a number of anti-clerical laws which alienated it from the Catholic Church. For example, it introduced laws which reduced the Church's power over education. This therefore brought about the negative attitude of the Catholic Church against the government, which inspired the Church to join the landowners and fascist elements in Spain to launch a civil war in 1936 under the leadership of General Franco. The attempts to reduce the influence of the army by the Second Republic of Spain caused the civil war. For example, in 1936 the government passed an army reform by which 8,000 officers were forced into retirement, and this offended the army so much. Similarly, General Franco, a senior army officer and strict monarchist, was sent to an obscure command in the Canary Islands off Africa. The army officers therefore decided to form the rebel nationalist army led by General Franco, which launched a civil war against the Republican government in July 1936. The need to end the separatist movements of Catalonia and the Basque Country caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. In 1922, an independence movement began in the Spanish region of Catalonia aimed at breaking this region away from the rest of Spain and create a separate state of Catalonia in northeastern Spain with its capital at the town of Barcelona. There was also the Basque Country, which was an autonomous province for the Basque people in northern Spain. In 1932, the Second Spanish Republic granted autonomy to the region of Catalonia following negotiations between the Catalonian separatists and the leaders of the Republic. General Franco and his colleagues hated this autonomy granted to these regions because it undermined national unity in the country. As a result, they launched a civil war in 1936 against the Liberal Republican government, so as to stop these separatist movements and maintain a united Spain. The nationalization policies of the Second Republic caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. 10th. 1931, the Republican government had instituted several measures aimed at establishing states' control over the major means of production in Spain as a step to end private ownership. For example, in the early 1930s, the Republican government put in place land reforms through which land in Spain was nationalized. This greatly annoyed the conservative landowners in Spain who had lost their land in this process. They therefore joined the Catholic Church and fascist elements under General Franco to stage a coup attempt against the Republican government in July 1936, which deteriorated into a civil war in Spain. The impact of urbanization in Spain caused the 1936–1939 civil wars. Spain witnessed rapid European history, the Spanish Civil War. These problems increased the unpopularity of the Liberal government, and General Franco therefore exploited this situation to stage a coup attempt in July 1936, which resulted into a civil war in Spain. The fear of communism in Spain caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. Communism was an economic system which advocated for the state control of businesses and other factors production like land, as well as giving much power to the workers. This ideology originated from Russia, following the success of the 1917 Russian revolutions, which overthrew the Tsarist regime and led to the establishment of communism. From Russia, communism spread to the Western European countries, including Spain, and sparked off instabilities that created fear among the businessmen, government officials, and landowners. For example, in October 1934, a general strike, an armed rising of workers or socialists, was put down by the Spanish army under General Franco on behalf of the government. Therefore, fearing that the Spanish liberal government would give way to a communist or Marxist revolution, the army officers under General Franco conspired to capture power in July 1936 so as to rid Spain of Bolshevism or communism. These officers also received support from the church and landowners who wanted to protect their private property like land. The weakness of the League of Nations caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. Formed in 1920, the League of Nations was expected to uphold democracy in Europe by defending democratic governments against any threats. However, due to its military and economic weaknesses, the League of Nations failed to defend the existing liberal democratic governments in Europe from being overthrown by dictators. For example, it failed to protect the Italian liberal government under King Victor Emmanuel Roman III from being overthrown in 1922 by Benito Mussolini. It also failed to stop Adolf Hitler from overthrowing the Democratic Weimar Republic in 1934, which had been established in 1919 following the resignation of Kaiser William Roman II. Such weaknesses therefore inspired General Franco to launch a civil against the Liberal Republican government of Spain in 1936. The military uprising of 1936 against the Liberal government caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. On 17 July 1936, a group of the most influential generals from the part of the Spanish army based in Morocco organized a military uprising against the Spanish Liberal government. This army rebellion, which was triggered off by the events in Madrid, soon spread to mainland Spain and exploded into a full-scale civil war that lasted from 1936 up to 1939. The impact of the success of the 1922 fascist revolution in Italy also caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. In October 1922, Benito Mussolini organized his fascists to march to Rome and capture power in a coup from the Italian liberal government under King Victor Emmanuel Roman III. The king refused to resist the march even though the Italian army was well equipped to disperse it. Instead, the king invited Mussolini to enter the parliament and told him to form a new government, which marked the rise of fascism in Italy. This success inspired General Franco to launch a civil war in Spain against the Republican government in 1936. The inspiration from the success of Adolf Hitler of Germany in 1934 also caused the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. In August 1934, Adolf Hitler rose to power in Germany after overthrowing the democratic Weimar Republic, which had failed to address Germany's social, political, and economic problems. This success by Adolf Hitler inspired General Francisco Franco to also stage a coup attempt in July 1936 against the Spanish Liberal government, and this eventually exploded into a civil. European history: the Spanish Civil War. Liberal democracy. This is what inspired Mussolini to join Hitler, fellow fascists, to go to Spain and assist General Franco to overthrow the liberal Spanish government. This eventually caused the Civil War in Spain. Effects of the Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939. The Spanish Civil War led to the collapse of the Republican government in Spain. The Second Spanish Republic was defeated by the nationalist army of the rebels under General Franco in 1939 because it was militarily weak, yet the rebels were being supported by strong powers like Germany and Italy. As a result, democracy in Spain was destroyed by the Civil War. It led to massive loss of lives on both sides of the conflict. Up to 1 million people, that included combatants and civilians, were killed in this conflict, which was the most devastating in the Spanish history. For example, over 6,000 priests and monks lost their lives because of the church's involvement in this civil war. It increased the media involvement in war coverage. Because the Spanish Civil War was a major international event that even involved foreign powers, it was given widespread media coverage. The war was therefore covered by well-known international reporters like Ernest Hemingway, George Orwell, and Robert Capa. Some of these reporters even produced international award-winning films about the Spanish Civil War. For example, Ernest Hemingway and Lilian Helena Coe produced The Spanish Earth, a film which was used to advertise Spain's need for military and monetary aid during the Civil War. It attracted the intervention of the foreign powers. The Spanish Civil War roused widespread passion across Europe and the world, which was increased by the efforts to both sides to win international support. As a result, Germany and Italy aided General Franco with planes, tanks, and arms so as to stop the spread of communism in Spain, while the Soviet Union and Russia supported the Republican side. In addition, thousands of communists and radicals from France, the USSR, America, and elsewhere formed the international brigades composed of foreign volunteers to aid the Republicans. These foreign forces successfully defended Madrid until the end of the Civil War. The Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939 led to the massive destruction of property. During the course of this 3 years' war, there was widespread destruction of cities like Madrid and Barcelona, as well as churches and homes, using modern weapons like mortars, tanks, and aircrafts that were supplied by the foreign countries. As a result, a lot of property was destroyed in Spain by the war, which left the country devastated. The Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939 made the fascist dictators popular in Europe. The Spanish Civil War was the first great clash of the 20th century ideologies of dictatorship and democracy, as the rebel nationalist army led by General Franco was aided by Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, while the Spanish Republican government was supported by Communist Soviet Union, Russia, and many volunteers from the liberal democratic nations. The success of the Civil War in 1939 marked the triumphal success of dictatorship over Western democracy. This therefore boosted the image of the fascist or Axis powers in Europe. The war clearly promoted the appeasement policy. The appeasement policy was a policy that was followed by the British and later French of avoiding war with aggressive powers such as Germany. European history: the Spanish Civil War of non-intervention, and therefore did not support the liberal democratic government of Spain. This was a clear manifestation of the appeasement policy, and it stopped the Spanish conflict from becoming a global conflict, as the situation had indicated, especially with the intervention of some foreign powers. The war led to the displacement of many Spanish people. The civil war that raged on for 3 years forced many people to migrate from Spain to other European countries like France, Russia, and Latin America, where they became refugees. This increased their suffering while staying in these foreign countries. It led to the establishment of fascism or dictatorship in Spain under General Franco. After their victory in 1939, the nationalists installed a dictatorial regime in Spain under General Franco that lasted for 36 years until General Franco's death in November 1975. Therefore, the Spanish Civil War led to the extension of fascism dictatorship to Spain, which marked the end of liberal democracy that Spain had enjoyed since 1931, when the Second Spanish Republic was established. It enabled the Germans and the Russians to use the war as a testing ground for their weapons. The Spanish Civil War involved the use of modern weapons that were availed to the two warring sides by Germany and the Soviet Union, Russia. These included submachine guns, mortars, bombs, artillery, tanks, and combat aircrafts, among others. This therefore increased the arms race in Europe, which threatened peace and stability and eventually led to the outbreak of World War II in 1939. The Spanish Civil War consolidated the friendship between Adolf Hitler of Germany and Benito Mussolini of Italy. Following their common foreign policy in Spain, where they jointly supported General Franco against the Republican government, the two fascist leaders became great allies. This therefore led to formation of an alliance of dictators known as the Berlin-Rome Axis on 25 October 1936, which united the two fascist states. This alliance was later joined by Hirohito of Japan to form the Berlin-Rome-Tokyo Axis, or an alliance of the Axis powers. The formation of these alliances partly contributed to the outbreak of the World War II in 1939. It increased the Russian hostility towards the Germans and Italians. Before the Spanish Civil War, the relations between Communist Russia and Germany, together with Italy, had been hostile because Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini were anti-communist, and yet Russia was a major communist country following the success of the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. When Russia clashed with Germany and Italy during the Spanish Civil War, this intensified the Russian enmity towards Germany and Italy, especially following the victory of the fascists in Spain by 1939. This therefore drew communist Russia to the Western democratic or capitalist powers of Britain and France during World War I and II of 1939–1945. The Civil War enabled the Spanish to overcome the Great Economic Depression. The Depression, which broke out in 1929, had resulted into a period of economic stagnation characterized by collapse of industries, increased unemployment and poverty in Spain. With the economic assistance from Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, Spain was able to recapitalize her economy, which helped her to recover from the economic hardships that had been caused by the Great Economic Depression. It encouraged Adolf Hitler of Germany to pursue further aggressive policies in Europe. When Adolf Hitler succeeded in invading Spain with the support of Italy so as to install a fascist regime under European history, the Spanish Civil War. The Spanish Civil War generated a new wave or method of warfare that had never been there before. This was characterized by the use of tanks and aircraft that spread terror through the bombing of cities. This was because during the war, Spanish cities like Madrid and Barcelona were heavily bombarded by the German and Italian aircrafts. Such war strategies were adopted during World War I and II. For example, USA bombed the two Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, which ended the Japanese resistance in World War I and II. It unearthed or exposed the weakness of the League of Nations. During the Spanish Civil War, Russia, Germany, and Italy ignored the League of Nations Covenant on Arms, which had limited the manufacture and use of deadly weapons after World War I. They instead resorted to the massive exportation of arms like tanks, aircrafts, submachine guns, and bombs to Spain. However, that League of Nations was unable to stop these powers from doing so, which therefore exposed its weakness as an international body that was charged with the responsibility of maintaining world peace and stability after World War I. The Spanish Civil War of 1936–1939 contributed to the outbreak of World War I and II in 1939. The Spanish Civil War served as a military ground for World War I and II because Germany, Italy, and Russia used it to test their weapons and tactics. It was also a dress rehearsal of World War I and II, as it split the world into forces that either supported democracy or dictatorship in Europe. This division of the world on ideological grounds eventually led to the outbreak of World War I and II in 1939. Explain the causes and consequences of the 1936–1939 Spanish Civil War. B. Explain the significance of the 1936–1939 Spanish Civil War in the history of Europe.